Hi, ladies. I'm going to wait a minute or two, and then please God, we'll start. Nice to see everyone. Okay. Waiting room, so I'll let them in. Here we go. Okay. Coming in a minute. So nice to see everybody. Okay, shall I wait one more minute? We're on 15:15. I think let's wait one more minute, and we're going to start with our Parsha class this week. Please, God, get my chumash open. Okay, I'm going to bring some flowers.
Oh my gosh,
Nice. I think
You look more beautiful than the flowers.
Roz, you're so sweet. Thank you, my darling. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're going to start. I'm going to start recording on my side, and I see Sharon is recording. Thank you, Cher. And thanks for everything you do, keeping us all updated and everything that we need on the technology side. Okay. All right, so this week we actually have a double parsha. And the two parshiot are Behar and Bechukotai. Now, I'm going to focus on Parshas Bechukotai. And we're going to be talking about struggle, suffering, darkness. But this is a Hasidus class. And so what I want to do is bring out the light, not make it a morbid class, God forbid. And so we're going to delve into a spiritual journey together, please God, and hopefully get a little bit of an understanding of the origins of struggle, the origins of pain and evil, specifically in light of what sadly happened on Lag BaOmer, on Mount Meron, where thousands of people went to be close to a tzaddik, to a holy person, and to try and tap into godliness. And yet there was this terrible tragedy which happened. And so, first of all, our learning should please God be in their merit. Obviously, there are too many to say all their names, but it should bring great light to their neshamas, please God. And those who are still trying to overcome their injuries should, please God, have a complete refuah. So let's begin. This week's parsha, or one of the parshiot, begins like this. Im bechukotai telechu ve'et mitzvotai tishmeru v'asitem otam. Which means, Hashem says, if you pursue the study of my laws, if you learn Torah, and you guard my commandments, my mitzvot, and observe them, and that im, the word im, is not only an if, but it's also a plea from Hashem. It's to say to Bnei Israel, please follow in this path. And then what's promised afterwards are that we will get our rains at the right time, and the land will yield its produce. We are promised so much in terms of peace and security within our land. We are promised inner quiet, inner peace. and abundant blessings, abundant physical blessings. But then the parasha continues, and we are also told the consequences of failure to observe the mitzvot. And that is referred to by many as what we call the tochacha, which means the rebuke. And this is an abundant list of curses that would befall Bnei Israel, if we fail to observe Hashem's commandments. And it's pages and pages of that which will befall us in the event that we don't stay on the path of Torah. And it talks about the most horrific calamities that would befall Bnei Israel. Terrible drought, starvation, being exiled from our land, being given over to the hand of our enemies, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, and so much more, where Hashem says that he will turn the heavens into iron so that there shall be no rain and there shall be no moisture that can come and replenish the earth. And we're going to delve into this a little bit and look, what are these negatives that seem to devolve from heaven upon us? And what can we learn out in the spiritual context of what's really going on in terms of trying to understand a little bit the ways of God? And in fact, the Alter Rebbe tells us that these are not actually curses, that they are in fact blessings. And if he makes a statement like that, then let's try and understand, according to Hasidus, how can he say such a thing? So we know that in this world, there is terrible pain. And as a Jewish nation, we have suffered horrors. We haven't just suffered, we haven't only suffered exile, we've suffered the most intense horrors at the hands of our enemies and persecution, children being sold into slavery, murder, intensely difficult trials that we've been through historically. So from this parsha, let's try and understand this. And we'll jump right in. When we look at the blessings of the Shema, that we say as part of the Shacharit service every morning, and I'm not talking about the Shema itself. Once we finish the Pesukei de Zimra, which are the verses of praise, then we come to the verses that are called the blessings of the Shema. And we say the blessings, and that's the build-up to the actual recital of the Shema itself. And so, what does it say? How does it begin? We begin with a blessing. We bless Hashem. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech. These are the words in the Siddur. And the words yotzer or uvorei choshech mean you form light and you create darkness. So from this pasuk, from this verse, we're going to understand so much about the ways of God. The word for formation is yotzer. Hashem forms light, and we could use that word light also to be translated or to mean blessing. And then the word for choshech, which is connected with the word creates, borer, is, we could say that the word choshech, darkness, can also be used as a synonym for suffering or for challenge or pain. So now, we've learned Hasidus together, and we know that in the Tanya it tells us that there are 4 worlds, and the highest of the world is the world of Atzilus. And then each world, as you go down, is less and less revealed godliness. And so each world has less light, less illumination. So the first world is the world of Atzilus. And then there is a diminution of light, and the light is somewhat dimmed, and then it's the world of Berea. But the world of Berea is incredibly brilliant. It's enormously illuminated. And then you get the world of Yetzirah, which still is much more godly than our world. And our world is the lowest world, the world of Asiya, the world of action. Now let's make that relevant to the verse that we've just spoken about. Yotzer or uvorei choshech. If you look at the wording, the word Yotzer, which we translate as forms, is actually connected with the world of Yetzirah. And the world, Borei Or, is connected with the world of Beria. That's clear. You can see that the words are completely linked to one another. And if we look at the order of the world of Beria is one higher than the world of Yetzirah. So when we say that blessing in the verses leading up to the Shema, we're actually mentioning how choshech, how darkness seems to come from a higher place of godliness than does light. And if we look at that more deeply in terms of the analogies we've used, then darkness comes, or we would say suffering, comes from a higher place of revealed godliness and a world of more light than does blessing. So how does that work? That seems so strange, because the way that we perceive the world is that the more suffering there is, the more concealed God is in the world. And that does work out on our plane, on this plane of Asiya. But if we're looking at illumination from above, if we're looking from the flow of light, of godly blessing from above, we're seeing that choshech, that darkness, is coming from a higher place of godliness than is light. It seems so strange. And we do understand, according to Hasidus, that Hashem is, we could say, the more essence part of God would be called what we call the Or Ein Sof, which means the light without end. Hashem is infinite. And from there, his light is condensed into the first world, the world of Atzilus, and then it becomes more and more condensed as it devolves down through the worlds. And so the light that we experience in this world, the world of Asiya, is really the most condensed light. We get much less light, much less revealed godliness than does the highest world. So we have to pose the following question. If darkness or suffering comes from a higher world, and its origin is a place of greater light, then why does it express itself as something bad in this world? Why would we say suffering is something bad if it's more from a place of revealed godliness? And with that question, we'll progress. So let's look at it like this. Let's give an analogy. Let's say I am a professor. I've just got my professorship. I did my PhD and whatever else you need. And I walk into a class and I really want to impress the students. I want to impress all my colleagues. I certainly want to impress the head of department. And so I decide that I'm going to give this incredibly high, lofty, Kabbalistic discourse. It's going to be unbelievable. And so I start to talk about the most Kabbalistic concepts about Nukva, which is the feminine principle, and how that relates to Zer Anpin, which corresponds with the 6 emotional attributes, and higher than that we get Arich Anpin. And I give this talk. Is anybody understanding? No. It's too lofty. So where are we left? We're left in the dark. We actually have received too much light, and we are not vessels that can contain that light. If we don't have that spiritual consciousness and that spiritual capacity and that absolute lofty, open intellect, then we cannot receive that. And even though what I'm trying to give over is incredible light and the most lofty of concepts, what we're experiencing really is darkness. We're left in the dark. It's confusion. And that is somewhat an analogy of what happens when Hashem sends us what feels like darkness. We experience this light. It's actually this more intense light that's coming down to us, and we experience, though, as darkness, because we are not vessels that can actually hold that light, that level of light. And neither is our world. So often what happens is that as that light or that blessing is coming down to our world and it goes through the worlds, it actually takes on many of the different components of the worlds through which it devolves. And therefore, in this world of Asiya, its experience, this blessing from above, this light from Hashem, is actually experienced as evil, as pain and suffering. But we see that in its origin, that's not what it is. That's not what God sends down to us. I read in a book which shares many of the teachings of the Holy Baal Shem Tov, Tzavat Harivash, that the only thing that comes down to us from above is blessing. There are no curses that devolve down to us from God, from the Almighty, because God is all good, and it is in the nature of that which is good to bestow good, to bestow goodness. So let's try and bring another analogy which works so beautifully. Like Hashem gives us so many beautiful hints in this world to try and understand his ways and to try and see the hand of God, how it works. Imagine that you had this huge lamp, and it's put really close to you, and it's very, very powerful. And the lamp is switched on, and it's shining brightly in your face. What do we see physically? What happens when we are confronted with that kind of light? We start to see these black spots. It becomes like darkness in front of our eyes. We don't actually see light because that light is too strong for us. And if that light is removed from us, and if it's diminished somewhat and it becomes a dimmer light, then what happens? We're able to see. So that goes back to the pasuk that we have quoted, because if we're saying that Or comes from the world of Yetzirah, which is a lower world than the world of Bria, then it's a more diminished light, and we can experience it as light, as blessing, as God's open hand of giving us sweetness. I think that understanding this is very important because it assists us in times of challenge not to feel like we are receiving this cruel and angry whack from Hashem. On the contrary, God is bestowing more light on us. He's sharing more of himself with us during times of challenge. I read something very beautiful in an article, and it was quoting a teaching by, I think, Rabbi Isaac Homela, who was a very great chassid. And it says that when a person overcomes a test of faith, what happens to them? That the essence of their soul starts to shine in their conscious faculties. And so it affects our speech and it affects our actions. We actually start to behave in a more godly way. And understanding the ways of Hashem assists us to have more faith, even in times of challenge and in times of struggle. So now let's take it and make it a little bit more, let's make it a little bit more concrete. Let's bring it down more. In terms of our personal suffering and struggling and not being able to really see the hand of God and perceive the godliness when we struggle, let's take an example that I like to use, and I apologize if you've heard this example from me before, but it's very telling and we'll thrash it out. Let's say there's a little girl, 3 or 4 years old. She's getting her big teeth now. And mommy says, bedtime, go and brush your teeth. And the little girl says, I don't want to. What's the child going to say? I don't want to. So if mommy says, okay, you know what, tonight, skip it, leave it. I do that with my children. We all have, right? And grandchildren. It's okay, skip it tonight. What does the little girl feel? Oh, mommy loves me. She's so kind and she's so understanding. And I don't have to feel uncomfortable and go and start brushing my teeth. I can just climb into bed and yay, I skipped over the difficult part. She feels really this kindness from mom. And now let's say mom ends up doing that night after night after night. All right, my dear, just skip it. Don't worry. She thinks she has the kindest mommy. Sure, she's so nice. And I feel so loved. And I just want to carry on feeling comfortable like this forever. Except when that child starts to reach 9 and 10 and then goes through teenagehood and even adulthood, the regret for that excessive chesed, that excessive kindness, will be intense. Why? Because she's going to be ugly. She's going to have yellow teeth. She's going to have marks on her teeth. She probably doesn't smell very attractive. And that's going to have a huge knock-on effect where people don't want to interact with her. They don't want to engage with her. She might have a problem with shidduchim, leaving out the option of orthodontics and dental and all of that. And what will she wish from the adult perspective, from a more mature perspective? She's going to wish that mommy had actually exercised more gevura when she was younger. She will wish for that gevura, that severity, when she was younger. When she was younger, she didn't have the capacity to see what the necessity for brushing teeth was. She only saw things from her limited little girl point of view, which was, wow, mommy's so kind. And as she gets older, though, she will see that if her mother had been more disciplined with her and shown more severity and pushed her to go brush teeth, that would have been a greater kindness. That chesed would have expressed itself in severity, in gevura. And her perception of it would have been, this is uncomfortable. Mommy's making me suffer. She's excessively strict on me. Let's say mommy had given a smack, because she's really going against mommy's will to brush her teeth. If mommy had given a smack to say, you will brush your teeth, when she's small, all she would have perceived was, ouch. The smack seems like the most random, unnecessary suffering that she's experiencing. And that's all she would have been able to perceive. But as she matures, she would have been grateful for it. That's the same as we are with Hashem, especially from a soul perspective. From a soul perspective, which we could make as an association with adulthood, the soul sees how that which comes from Hashem sometimes feels like random, unnecessary suffering. What's the point, Hashem? You're just unfair. That's because we're limited like the little girl. We don't have that capacity. Who has the capacity to see the ways of God and completely understand them? We just don't. But the soul sees, and the soul can see things like an adult and understand the beauty and the love and wisdom behind that which is difficult for us, that which makes us uncomfortable, or God forbid, even worse, suffer enormous pain. However, there's still this point. The child knows that it's coming from mommy, and please God, it's a functional relationship. Then she knows mommy loves me. And mommy afterwards can still hold her and wipe her tears and try to explain to her Whereas we don't experience that. Let's be honest. We don't see the hand of God in suffering. What we usually see is the hand of the person or the agent who's metering out suffering to us. It would be much easier if we saw Hashem behind it. And if he actually took us and wiped away our tears physically, the way a mommy does, in a completely revealed manner. So say the Hasidic masters, what's the point of that? Why is it that the agents of those who inflict pain on us are so completely separated from God that we don't see Hashem in the picture? It's nice because we're understanding it in theory now, but when we experience it, it's not the same. And how is it that people can express such evil in the world, and people like Hitler and Stalin, Yamach Shemo, can actually be agents of evil that seems to proliferate in such an obvious way and cause so much pain? How is there godliness behind this? So it's explained that imagine you have the perfect court of the most perfect judges, and Hashem is often referred to as the heavenly court, and Hashem is the perfect judge. Hashem keeps the balance of justice perfect, and we say Hashem is a God of truth. So when the judges are metering out a sentence, and let's say they give a sentence of lashes, of whipping, a very smart and wise and holy judge feels compassion in his heart. He actually doesn't want to give this sentence. He would like to commute it and let the person go. But he knows that spiritually that is not going to benefit this person. They will not either undergo the necessary change through experiencing trial and tribulation that trials often push us to embrace, or they will not have that spiritual cleansing that a person gets from undergoing suffering. Suffering in itself is a cleansing. We need to know that it washes away and it purifies our soul from much of the darkness or that which we end up covering over our soul. We sully our souls when we go against the will of Hashem. And so suffering is a kindness because it purifies us. But the judge hands out the sentence, and it's not him who carries out the sentence. The person who is tasked with giving lashes doesn't know anything about the person who's going to receive the sentence. He doesn't know him. He doesn't care for him. There's no compassion. He is simply the agent of carrying out the punishment. And so too it is in our world. It's Hashem who has compassion. It's Hashem who meters out whatever it is that comes to us. But the person who's the agent of our pain is completely divorced from us and from knowing anything about us or caring about us the way that the Almighty does. And what's the purpose of that? The purpose is that we should feel the effects of that which has been decided for us from on high. If you saw God, then we wouldn't feel the sting to the degree, and it wouldn't be as impactful. And therefore, the person who is the agent of pain, the agent of causing us distress or whatever it is that we experience, that person is, by divine providence, completely divorced from Hashem. And that's how we experience it. Now, just to keep in mind, and this is very important, whatever it is that has been decided for us from above, and whatever it is that Hashem sends to us that we need to experience, there is a person who's going to carry out that, whatever it is. that judgment against us, or that pain that it has been decided we must experience. However, if a person chooses to be the agent of somebody's pain, then they will be held accountable before Hashem. It's not just because this was decreed for us on high that a person then is not held accountable, because each person has a choice to be someone who inflicts discomfort and suffering on another or not. If a person decides they don't want to inflict pain on another, then another agent will carry that out. And that's very important to know that, as we said before, Hashem is completely just. If a person is an agent of our pain, they are held accountable before the Almighty. They have a choice not to be. Okay, let's take this a little bit further and look at things, the most intense tragedies and the most intense suffering. What about things like the Holocaust? And let me preface that by saying we don't know why. There is no excuse for any nation or any people bringing out such cruelty and expressing such cruelty in this world. Nor do we understand why our nation and others had to suffer this way. But I did see an idea that got me thinking. And this idea is from a Baal Tshuva who lives in Australia. His name is Robert Kremnitzer, and he is an attorney. And through the Rabbi and through the teachings of Chabad, which resonated for him very deeply, he has become a Baal Tshuva. And he's written several books. He's written some beautiful, beautiful works, The Ladder Up, The Curtain Parted. And this specific work is called The Lawyer and the Mystic. And it's a story, but within it he weaves beautiful teachings. And he brings the following idea. He says like this: imagine that all those who passed away in the Holocaust, imagine that in terms of a soul's perspective, dying at that time in that way as a Jew and dying because one is a Jew, imagine that that was their only way to get to the highest places in Gan Eden. And how long has it been since the Holocaust? Let's say, I stand corrected, 70 years, 70 plus years. How long was that horrific war? From about 1938 till about 1945. So those souls, please God, that are in Gan Eden Ha'elyon, the highest Gan Eden, they've been there for much longer than they suffered during the Holocaust. If we were to speak to them now, perhaps they would say, this place that we have merited through that suffering is Hashem's greatest kindness to us, and it's an eternity. Would they choose it from the perspective of the soul? I think perhaps they would, because you had the most righteous of people and you had the most lowly people who were murdered, and we don't know Hashem's ways. But from a soul perspective, perhaps they now would tell us that it was Hashem's greatest kindness. And so we need to always, always burl. But is that the point of all of this, that their souls get rewarded with Gan Eden? Okay. So I'm glad you brought that up, because we live in a world where not seeing the hand of God gives us free choice. What's the point? The Alter Rebbe says that, yes, people have in the past died al Kiddush Hashem, but a higher level, and what we are being called on to do today, is to live al Kiddush Hashem. So you bring out a good point. What's the whole point? What's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is not just me and my personal Gan Eden. That's not the point. The point really is to bring about a a dira b'tachtonim in this world, a dwelling place for Hashem in this world. That is Hashem's desire, before even it is our desire. We have to cultivate that desire within us. And that will benefit all of mankind. And sometimes if a person does die al Kiddush Hashem, that does bring an enormous light, a revelation of light into this world. But on a personal level, what's the point? The point is our soul. The point is not comfort. That's what we always pursue. We're so afraid of being made uncomfortable. And we shouldn't pursue discomfort and pain. God forbid, not at all. But the point is also to open ourselves up to the point where we live a messianic reality. Now that's a big ask, but the Rebbe says that it's possible, especially today. The Rebbe says, open up our eyes. We must open up our eyes and see that we are living in the times of Mashiach. And the more we live with that, the more it becomes the reality that we manifest in this world. And the more that we are connected with Hashem, so that every day is a day of miracles. And so that, God forbid, if there is suffering, we don't experience it in that way. I was reading, and it's very relevant actually at this time, I was reading a sikha about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And what does it say? What does Chassidus bring out? That Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai sent his son once to two great sages to get a blessing. And his son came back very disturbed. His holy son says, Father, they gave me curses. What were they doing? What were they thinking? And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who lived with a messianic consciousness, who did not live with the Churban, he didn't live with the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. He had transcended that reality, and he lived in another reality. He said to his son, no, I see they have given you absolute blessing, absolute bracha. The purpose is that we should access that enormous godliness within us. And that should be what we pursue first. Before comfort and luxury, it's so easy to get caught up in that. And I'm talking about me, perhaps not everybody here, but I easily get distracted. And so when we try and understand things from a soul's perspective, and we try and keep the soul in the forefront of our mind, even within physicality, because we're not supposed to live either with physicality or with spirituality. We're supposed to live the two together. Then we are fulfilling our goal. There's a beautiful story that I want to bring, and then I'll bring the final story. And that is of an incredibly beautiful and holy sage who lived at the times of Rabban Gamliel, who's quoted in Pirkei Avos, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was in fact a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And this was the beautiful and holy Rabbi Hanina ben Doisa. And there's a story that Rabbi Hanina lived in a town, and at the time there was the different opinions, but I read one story that says there was this poisonous scorpion. And it was terrifying, and it was going through the town and stinging people. And when it stung, the person died. So its venom was deadly. And the people went to the holy Rabbi Hanina and said, help us with this. So he asked them, take me to the scorpion's lair, take me to the scorpion's hole where it lives. And they took Rabbi Hanina ben Doisa to the scorpion. And what did he do? He took off his shoe and he put his foot above the hole or the home of the scorpion. And the scorpion came out and it stung him. And the scorpion died. And Rabbi Hanina ben Doisa said, what do we learn from this? That it is not a scorpion sting that kills, but the sins of the people that end up in death. because Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa was so righteous, he worked with simplicity to fulfill the will of God always. What's the point? That's the point. How do we do it? We have a Torah which gives us the instructions. And every single day, the Rebbe says, we must improve on who we were the day before. Every day. We should always have in our consciousness, I need to do more. I need to be better. Spiritually, I've got to keep working harder. And that's the point. But it assists us when we learn Torah, because then we start to understand more and more the ways of God, and we feel supported by Hashem. And it opens us up to want to be closer to Hashem. So I'm going to end with this story, and some people will be familiar with it. Why did I choose this story? My mother heard this shiur last night. She was unhappy with me. She said, so heavy, it's so dark. But the point is, one, to show that those who cause pain and suffering, the cruel people of this world, who we're not talking about anybody here, they will stand before Hashem to give an accounting. And Hashem will make sure that they pay for such cruelty. Number one. And this story illustrates it. And number two, we see the enormous power that we have in this physical realm through doing mitzvot, through tefillah, through taking on something that we actually can positively affect another. And we can positively affect those in the next world, hugely. So the stories of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was walking through a cemetery, a Jewish cemetery once, and he saw this terrifying sight in front of him. What did he see? He saw a naked man who was black as charcoal. He was burnt all over, carrying some wood and rushing around like a horse. And Rabbi Akiva said to him, stop. Now, if someone as holy as Rabbi Akiva says, stop, the person will stop. And the person stopped. And Rabbi Akiva said, what's with you? Why do you look like this? He said, if you are a slave with such a cruel master, then I will free you. And Rabbi Akiva, he had such compassion on this man. He said, if you are poor and your poverty has made you look like this, then I will give you wealth. And the man answered him and said, I am dead. I am from the land of the dead, he said, and please do not delay me, because my supervisors are going to punish me if you do. And Rabbi Akiva said to him, what were you in your lifetime? Because he realizes this is a consequence of the way this man lived. And this man, the dead man, who obviously stops, because when such kedusha, when such holiness, as the holy Rabbi Akiva says, stop, he has to stop. And the man said, in my lifetime, I was a tax collector. And he says, I favored the wealthy and I persecuted the poor. And Rabbi Akiva nevertheless felt so sorry for him, because a great person has compassion. And he said, have you heard anything in the heavenly realms? Have you heard anything in the heavenly courts about what might bring a rectification for your soul and free you from this hell? And the man said, first of all, the reason I'm rushing and I've asked you not to delay me is that every single day my supervisors, the angels, send me out to collect wood. And at night they use that wood to burn me day after day after day. Rabbi Akiva says, what would bring about your rectification? And he says, I have heard in the heavenly realms that if I were to have a son who could go to shul and say Kaddish for me, and the people would answer, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach, then that would free my soul. He says, but I don't have a son, and there is no hope for me. The man said, when I died, my wife was indeed pregnant, but I don't know if she had a boy or a girl. And if she had a boy, he knows nothing of Torah. So Rabbi Kiva asked him, what is your name? He said, my name is Ukba. And he told him his wife's name. And he told him the town that he had come from. And immediately Rabbi Akiva committed and took upon himself to go to that town. So kind was he. And he went to that town and he started to ask around, did you know Ukba, who was married to this? And as soon as the people heard this name, they cursed him. A curse be upon him. May he be burning in hell, they said. He was so cruel. He caused so much pain and suffering. And Rabbi Akiva asked, and his wife? They said, may her name be erased. She was evil. And they told him, and she had a son. And we so didn't care about this evil couple's son that to this day he remains uncircumcised. The community did not even help this Jewish boy to circumcise him because they hated the parents so much. And Rabbi Akiva found the boy and he circumcised him. And then he took him to teach him Torah. And the child would not learn a word. He couldn't concentrate. He could take nothing in. So what did Rabbi Akiva do? For the sake of this soul who had been so cruel in his lifetime, nevertheless, what did he do? He fasted for 40 days until a buskal, a voice from heaven came out and said, Akiva, what is it that you want? Why are you doing this? And Akiva said, Rabbi Akiva said, he said, Hashem, have I not taken this lad and stood and say that I will be a guarantor for him? Open up his mind so he can learn. And immediately, if a tzaddik asks Hashem, because a tzaddik does the will of God, God reflects that back and does his will back. And so immediately the boy's mind was opened. And Rabbi Akiva taught him. And he taught him how to say Shema. He taught him to say Shemona Esrei. He taught him to say the Birkat HaMazon. And eventually took him to Shul. And he could say Kaddish. And then the community responded, Amen, Amen, Yehei Shema, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach. And this soul came to Rabbi Akiva and told him, your efforts have been successful. And he thanked him that he saved him from the fires of Gehenna. It's a very intense story. But look at the power we have through taking on something in the realm of Kedusha to uplift another. And look how much we can do for those who are in the world of truth. They're in the world of truth, but they are somewhat shackled in terms of their spiritual progression. We are in this world, and though we are so blind to what we are doing, we need to understand we can do so much. Through our acts of holiness, through tzedakah, through a mitzvah, through learning Torah, we can elevate the souls of those who have already passed on. So I hope we can take that message. I hope we can understand that Hashem's ways are all ways of rachamim. That's where they originate. And please God, that can propel us forward positively. But nevertheless, we also need to tell Hashem that we don't want suffering. We don't want to see suffering. We don't want to experience suffering. We want Mashiach. Thanks, ladies. Thanks for joining me. If there are questions or comments, please just unmute yourself, and because I can't actually see everybody, I've got this gallery view. So go ahead.
Rich, can I please have the name of that guy who wrote The Lawyer and the Mystic?
His name is Robert Kremnitzer. I'll post it on our group.
Okay.
Roz. And if you want, you can just send me a personal message and I can send it to you. I can send you a picture also. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It sounds like a book worth getting. Thank you.
It's beautiful. My husband bought it for me once. I think it was our wedding anniversary, and he knows I love this author. And you can find more of his work also on Chabad.org. And he talks about the positivity.
Robert who? Your Robert's surname?
Kremnitzer. Kremnitzer.
Okay.
Might pronounce it differently, but I don't know.
Thanks.
Would you put
Brigitte.
Bill,
Put it on the-
Bye.
nice to see you. Thank you for your question.
Thanks.
Amazing
Thank you. Shkar.
thank you.
Baruch Hashem.
Zagos.
Thanks, ladies. So nice to see you all. Thank you. Thanks for joining today. Adele, Beulah, Roz, Jean, hello. Nice to see everybody, and nice to see all the names that have joined today also. Thank you, everybody, for coming and for learning with me.